Hey guys, so today we are going to talk about mental health and everything about mental health and why is it even so important. I've gathered a few friends. I got Dr. Dan Cordaro, who is from the Contentment Foundation. He's going to give us all the, sciencey and neuroscience stuff that goes behind the brain. And then we also have Nick, who is a survivor and who has also went through depression and has lived experience. So he's going to share with us. And last but not least, we have Asher from Limitless, who is part of a non-profit organization, and they're here to share their experiences from the ground. All right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Asher, Nick, and Dan for joining us today. I wanted to talk about, Nick. Nick is actually sort of like experienced depression, right? How would you say it actually?
So it started maybe when I was in 2016 or 2017.
Okay.
And so it was during those times where, you start to feel almost like this mental agony, and I couldn't really articulate it. And so I think that was like how the suffering sort of happened, because I wasn't able to verbalize it. And because of that, I chose not to verbalize it, and that's when the problem, I think, started.
Do you see any sort of like signs or telltale signs when you were sort of like feeling like you were going into depression?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when it affected me mentally, when I was emotionally drained or psychologically drained, I couldn't articulate it. But then when it started to transcend that and become a more physical suffering, where I couldn't get out of bed, my body became heavy, then I started to see it as a problem. So I think that's why it's really important for us to be talking about this, because it's very hard to articulate mental health, and maybe Dan can probably provide the science to it. But, as I went through it, I started to appreciate it more like language, in the sense that, there are certain words in another language that you cannot directly translate to English. And it's the same with mental health. Almost like you cannot translate how you're feeling and suffering in your language. And because of that, no one can understand. Yep. And that was the suffering for me, I felt.
When you're in depression, like sometimes, are there like telltale signs or anything that you feel like, for me, when I realized that I was going through something was when I didn't want to wake up. I wanted to stay in bed the whole day. I didn't want to meet any of my best friends. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I wanted to just be by myself. And, I did have suicidal thoughts, but I wasn't that, it takes a lot to actually experience something like that. So are there telltale signs? I don't know, when it comes to like going through depression, like name a few that maybe somebody will be like, actually that could be me. I don't know.
Or maybe the professionals in the room can help with this.
I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I wouldn't be able to advise on this. But I think the real take-home piece here, the simplest advice that I can give is that if something feels wrong, just say something. Ask for help. Just like if you wake up and you have a cough and you have a fever, you're probably going to tell your friend, "Hey, I think I'm sick. I might have a cold, so I'm going to stay home. I'm going to take care of myself, or I'm going to go to the doctor and maybe see what's wrong." The same thing needs to happen on the emotional level or on the psychological level. If you wake up and you feel down, you feel like you can't get out of bed, you're feeling a lack of motivation, if anything feels off, say something. That's the most important thing that we can do, because number one, it reinforces that it's okay to talk about these things. And mental health symptoms are just as common as physical health symptoms. We need to have these conversations more frequently before they become really serious and really severe. And number two, it helps develop that inner awareness so that it can refine your attention on when things are wrong on an even micro level. Like if somebody says something that bothers you, or maybe a situation makes you feel a little bit anxious, you'll be able to perceive that faster and do something about it more quickly. And then that helps the whole pipeline from start to finish when you start feeling some of these symptoms all the way to finding a solution. So the take home is, if you feel off, if something feels a little bit wrong, no matter what it is, just say something. Tell a friend, tell a loved one, tell someone you know and trust, and then take the conversation from there.
Maybe just to add on to Dan's, to what Dan shared, I think that was awesome. If you feel there's something wrong, go see someone. Maybe I can think about like a few common symptoms or common things that you might want to see, might want to be a little bit more wary of. One is insomnia. If I cannot sleep, and it's not because of bad sleeping habits. Right? If you're always sleeping at 4, then that's your problem. Right? But if suddenly you're not able to sleep and there are thoughts that are running through your mind, you're worried, and that's keeping you up at night, or the sleep is keeping you, is perpetuating you, this cycle of feeling down. I think that's something that you want to kind of like get looked at. And another thing is like, when you start losing interest. When you start losing interest in things that you used to love, when you start losing interest in your goals in life, when you start losing interest in hanging out with friends, and when you start to realize, right, that you are starting to isolate yourself, I think that's very key. When you're starting to like shy away from people and you say like, hey, I just don't feel like talking to anyone today, and it's not a one-day thing. It's not a 1 week thing. It's like a 1 month thing whereby I'm just not wanting to talk to anyone. And that's not the norm.
Asher, from you, I mean, being on the ground and being part of a non-profit organization that reaches out to these kind of people, do you feel like people reach out to you easily, or like do you feel there's still sort of a stigma around mental health, do you think?
I think there's definitely going to be a stigma. Now, I work with youths, all right?
Yeah.
So youths are that particular group that finds it the most difficult to reach out.
Okay.
Because of all the stigma that surrounds mental health, but yet also all the stigma that surrounds reaching out. Because like if I go and speak to my school counselor, my parents are going to know. My teacher's going to know, right? Then my whole school's going to know. And I think that's a challenge. We posted a TikTok like, on Monday, if I'm not wrong. And we talked about like 13 reasons why people don't seek help.
Oh, that's cool.
And all the responses, right, most of them were targeted towards 2 things. 1, there's going to be a permanent record. 2, people are going to snitch on me. Right? So I think that's a common misconception. And those are very common misconceptions. Right? And the challenge around you seeking mental health help, right, is it goes beyond there. It goes into money.
Yeah.
Right? I got no
100%.
money. How am I going to pay
100%.
for like therapy? What happens when I don't have that money? And the people that have the money in my life, right, are not people that I want involved in this journey, possibly because I don't have a great relationship with them, but also commonly because they are part of the equation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, I mean, I wanted to touch on Ash's point. I think when you're suffering from any sort of mental health issues, I guess for me was clinical depression. I don't think when we are suffering, we ever, or at least I never gave my loved ones a chance to understand what I was going through. For a variety of reasons. 1, probably because I didn't understand it myself. But number 2, like you guys mentioned, maybe they were part of the problem, maybe they were not, but we never took the time to really figure that out. But I think more importantly, it's for those who are suffering, to also appreciate that sometimes people will find it hard to understand because they cannot empathize with something that they've never experienced. And so it's, even though it's hard during that time, it's also our responsibility to not be too hard on the people who love us but who don't know how to help us. Because love manifests in different ways.
But which is why I think it's so important for us to understand our own mental health and to learn how to articulate it so that the people around us can support us, right?
Yes.
I mean, a lot of times, I have went to my mother when I was depressed and I say, oh, I was eating lunch and I was just like crying and she said, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? And I said, I'm just feeling sad. She said, you have nothing to be sad about. But I said, if I knew the reasons of why I was sad, I wouldn't be crying. I think I wouldn't be crying.
Yeah.
But because I don't know, even more it baffles me and even more I can't explain it to you.
Yeah.
I think like for me, when I started being aware of my mental health, when I was sort of in depression, I didn't really think about it as depression. I just knew I was very sad and I had to express. So I was journaling a lot. I feel a lot of times, you know, when I'm aware of how I feel, I handle the situations a lot better. And I feel like, okay, this is making me very sad. Why is it making me very sad? I'm aware that I have something to fix. Okay, how do we fix it?
I guess to your point, and just an extension of that, I think it's also okay to even, even as you discover or try to discover what's happening, it's okay if you never figure it out. You know, it takes time, it's a process, and that's why we have professionals like Dan or Asher to really help us uncover it and to verbalize what we cannot verbalize.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, sometimes it's a situational, circumstantial thing. Sometimes it's it's a bodily thing.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes it's a physical, genetic issue. And I think the reality is that some people's brains are just predisposed to certain kinds of mental health conditions. Right? And when certain situations or circumstances come along in life, that predisposition puts them at a greater risk of getting hurt, of getting ill, getting sick. I think one area in which we can or how we can take a quick stock check of where we are at in our headspace is to think about, like I said earlier on, you know, there's no health without mental health, and we want to look at it from a very holistic point of view. So, you know, in my practice, we use what we call the BPSNS, right? So bio, psycho, social, and spiritual. And when we think about it biologically, am I doing okay? Am I sick? You know, am I taking care of my body? Am I taking care of my body in a way that I want to see my body, right? Psychologically, am I under a lot of stress? Has there been something that's gone on in my life recently that has really put me under a lot of pressure? Am I in a state of grief? Did I just lose something, you know? Am I taking care of myself, giving myself the time and the space to have those mental breathers, sometimes just not doing anything, you know? Then socially, am I having the right social connections?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not about having social connections, it's about having the right ones. If you are a friend out there and you see that your friend needs help, I think it's important to just empathize.
You know, just be there for a person really, really helps.
Yeah.
I have a friend who had depression and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't help her. I couldn't find ways to help her other than just being there for her and just being, you're sad? Okay, I'll sit beside you and absorb whatever you're giving to me, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the only support that, you know, I mean, not the only support, but one of the most important support that we can give or have.
You're right.
Yeah.
And very often healing comes from relationships, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last one definitely is like spiritual, and when we think about spiritual, it's not just about faith.
Yeah.
I mean, faith can play a part, and in my own recovery journey, right, faith played a huge part. But but when we think about spirituality, it goes beyond that. Am I centering myself? Am I grounded, you know, in my beliefs and my values? And do I have something, you know, to look forward to? Do I have meaning? Do I have goals? If I don't have, right, it's okay to not have.
What do you think are some tools you feel like people in everyday could sort of like adapt and use for their mental health? Like for me, I just like to lie on the floor.
Yeah.
Sounds so weird, but there's a carpet.
Yeah.
But I lie on the floor and just like figure out, oh, how am I feeling? What is it going on? If something triggers me, I always ask myself the question, why? Why do I feel that way? For me, I feel like that grounds me. How about you guys? Any tips on how I guess people can sort of face this better?
It got me thinking about something you said earlier about really just, you know, appreciating that, you know, you have a problem and you're trying to discover it. And over time, I kind of learned or maybe figured out by accident that there seems to be multiple levels of acceptance of what you're going through. And the first, especially in an Asian community is just the acceptance that you have a problem can be it's something that we will find difficult to accept, because if we acknowledge it, it means that it's out. Yeah, exactly, right? And nobody wants a problem. Yeah. And then after that, the second layer, I think, is more prevalent also in the Asian community, is that accepting that other people may not understand it, and it doesn't devalue your suffering. Because the moment, whether, especially if someone who's of authority to you, like authority maybe is not the right word, but like maybe your parent or your loved one just brushes it off. Sometimes that can play to you, and you can start to think like, oh, maybe I don't really have a problem. Maybe it's,
Maybe I'm overthinking.
Exactly.
Or maybe I'm too emotional.
Yeah.
There are many practices that we can engage in that really make a huge difference, that don't cost a lot of money, that don't require a lot of fancy equipment or special training or anything like that. One of the foundations of beginning a journey towards greater mental health is simply understanding yourself on a deeper level. It's self-awareness. So knowing, what triggers us, what brings us into states of joy or states of depression or states of anxiety, and why that happens. Understanding the nature of the thoughts in our mind and where they come from, whether they were potentially given to us by somebody outside through expectations or what society wants, or whether there's something genuine from the inside that we feel purposeful around. So knowing ourselves on a really deep, intimate level can make a huge difference later on, so that when you're feeling a shift in emotion, you can better understand why that's happening and what can be done about it in that moment. So really the foundation of that journey towards mental wellness begins with self-awareness.
Why is an organization like Contentment Foundation so important for the future of the youths?
Yeah, thanks for the question, May. And it's not just the Contentment Foundation, it's the whole idea behind providing the next generation of our children with the practices that they need to live healthier and more sustainable psychological lives than the generation before them. So the Contentment Foundation provides preventative tools and practices to schools, to students, teachers, family members all around the world, in the hope that students will be able to practice these things like mindfulness, self-compassion, self-awareness, empathy, trust, forgiveness, things that build safe, healthy communities and safe and healthy minds, so that later on they'll be less susceptible to more serious mental health issues because they have the tools to navigate them.
Totally agree. I think especially, I feel like if I had those tools when I was younger, the tools that I know now, when I was younger, I think I wouldn't have been that, not being able to control my emotions or reacting and only focusing on the negative stuff, right?
Yeah.
Asher, how about you? You feel like is sort of help accessible here in Singapore? Like from the ground, do you feel like people are like open to come towards?
In general, I feel that it's been getting easier for people to seek help, because people are starting to understand a little bit more about what mental health issues look like. But at the same time, we as a society have to continue, right, to make that help-seeking process a lot easier for young people. Because realistically and statistically, most of the people who struggle with mental health issues, they start young.
Yeah.
Right. So statistically, 50% or around 50% of people who have struggled with a mental health issue or a serious or chronic mental health issue start to see symptoms at the age of 14. Mm-hmm. And about 75% start to see symptoms at 24. So that means that before the age of 24, the majority of people who are going to struggle with a mental health issue in their lifetime, right, would have already started struggling.
Especially now that we're cooped up at home, and a lot of us are cooped up at home with our parents, and for people who are going through, I guess, depression, it's so important for parents, I think, to be sort of like the pillar of support. But a lot of times, that is not the case, right?
Yeah.
And I think Nick would know this best.
Yeah.
I heard your podcast and I thought it was brilliant that your mom had a shift in perspective in order to understand where you were coming from. And that was super beautiful. Maybe you can share a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the thing I take for granted. And And even after recovery, that's something I always think about, in the sense that if I put my suffering aside, whatever I was going through, painful, uncomfortable, what have you, I think I really took for granted the fact that the people who love you, seeing you suffer is just as painful, especially during this time when families are whether by force or because of COVID, are being stuck together, are trapped together. I think more so than ever, we need to be a little bit more patient and a little bit more comfortable with everyone's discomfort.
Yeah.
Because everyone is just trying to navigate the problems without maybe having the right tools, which hopefully we can learn more of, or the right language to express.
I have a question actually for you. So if let's say my parent, I'm having depression and my mom at home, I want to try to explain it to her. What do you think, based on your experience, is the best way to drop the news? Or to like at least help get her to understand it, you know? It's not an easy process, I know, but like, you know, to be open-minded or to get your mom to be open-minded, what's it like? Because, you know, I think parental support is so important, and especially when it's supposed to be a place that you feel comfort and it's your safe space. Like even more, these people should understand it. Maybe they don't have to find a solution for you, but how do you get them to kinda understand what you're going through?
I think what I would probably recommend is on both sides. I think first, the person who's suffering from any sort of mental health, to appreciate that, you know, love comes in many forms, and that love doesn't necessarily represent a solution for your problems. And you still need to find the right avenue to deal with it. And it may not be the people who are closest to you. But I think more importantly, for the people who want to help, number one, the hard truth that, especially it might be hard for like parents or anyone to hear, is that it's not your responsibility to solve their problem. Maybe it's your responsibility to support them, but you might not have enough context to address it. And so it's really about finding ways to meet them where they are, to get them to the help they need, or to even at the very least be comfortable being open about what they're going through.
So Asha, do you feel like you often struggle with like people who maybe don't have this help at home or don't have this support system at home?
We do see that there are people out there who happen to be in homes whereby, you know, if I share with my mom, she's gonna take it personally. Like, well, you mean I didn't raise you well enough? Or you know, sometimes, like going back to the same issue, you know, like sometimes the mental health condition is caused by abuse or neglect in the family. And in those situations, I don't think it's very possible to tell your parents, 100%. Even if your parents love you and this abuse or neglect is not something that they're aware of. I think that's very true, you know, because sometimes we can be unknowingly abusive to our kids. You know, because that's how our parents raised us.
I think if you don't have family at home that can help you, maybe you can look for friends outside. If not, you know, you can always go to places like Limitless and find Asha. And there's a lot of, actually, now there are apps, there are even apps, and there are a lot of websites and resources. Even We The Good has put up a set of resources that you can look for and people that you can reach out to. So even if you cannot find a safe space, like there are safe space away from the family that you know. I think that's important for everyone to remember.
But I like to speak on that actually. And maybe it's a bit subjective because it's my lived experience. I only mental health help is relatively available in Singapore. But you would rarely notice it because it's not something that's advertised or anything like that. And I only actually figured out who can help me when I attempted suicide. So it then begs the question of how do you reach people in a way that's, of course, non-intrusive, but in a way that at least, at the very least, at the back of their mind, they know how and when to find it. Because, having something available is one thing, but you being able to remember that it's there is a completely different thing. So I think that's something that's worth having a discussion. I mean, not here, but like in general.
Yeah, I think I think that's very important. Like for sort of like you to be aware, for your friends to be aware. Sometimes you forget, Sometimes you're so in the moment and in the feeling that you forget about it. Yeah.
I think also it boils back down to like us all growing up not thinking that mental health is a part of our overall health.
Yeah.
So actually I could just go to the polyclinic and talk to the doctor.
Could we
Yeah,
actually
you
go
can.
to the doctor and talk to him that,
You can.
like doctor, I'm
wouldn't
feeling
know,
damn sad today.
Yeah, you can. You can go to the doctor in the polyclinic, get a referral, and they refer you to a psychologist. Some polyclinics have in-house psychologists.
Cool.
Like Hougang Polyclinic.
Oh wow.
Alright, so
that's cool.
some polyclinics have in-house like mental health teams. And the doctors are generally trained to a certain extent to actually not fully diagnose, but to understand that there's something wrong. And that's when the specialist comes in. Yeah. So I think you're right to say that we need to be a little bit better at advertising our mental health services.
If someone is suffering, is there any tips or insights that maybe you can share? Maybe there's a parent watching this or a friend watching this who maybe has someone that, they need help with. Is there a tip?
I think one of the things that I do share in when we work with young people, and that's one thing they ask us all the time, like how do I help, right? How do I help? And we can break it down to just three very simple things: talk, listen, and tell. So when I think about talking, sometimes asking you how are you doing? How's your day? Just, and not be so focused on giving them answers.
Yeah.
Not be so focused on giving them the right things, saying the right thing to them, but really just talking to them like a friend. Like how you doing? You're doing okay. You haven't been around for a little while. I'm worried about you. You want to talk about anything? And then after that, listening. And think listening meaning by when I say listening, I mean listen without judgment, without having that right answer.
Yeah.
Without giving advice. And for all you know, they just need someone to listen to them. For all you know, they need someone to just be there when they need that, right? And not give them all that not coddle them or smother them.
Yeah.
Right. So part of that listening process is important as well. Just being a good friend lah. And then finally telling. So when do you tell someone else, right? When that friend or that child or that parent, is in danger. Yeah. And I think the telling process is a very tricky process. What if they hate me? What if they don't like me anymore? What if I lose a friend? Sometimes I just say, that, if you feel that your friend's life is in danger and you have to tell someone, you have to break the news, you might even have to get emergency services involved, right? It's better to lose a friend than to lose them for good. Yeah. And that's when you tell. Yeah. So talking and listening it's really important. I find that, like we mentioned earlier on, like healing comes in relationships. Yeah. Healing happens in relationships, and when I'm taking the time to listen, when I'm taking the time to just have those conversations and give a damn about that person's day.
I think that's a super good point. I feel like parents, instead of worrying about finding a solution for their kid, or be like, oh my god, okay, now I need to solve your problem. Like, I think it should be more of the just listen. I think for me, the best thing that helped me was the fact that although they didn't understand it, they were willing to listen, and they were willing to say like, I don't understand why you're feeling. I said, never mind, I don't need you to understand it, because I don't even understand it, right? So if you are a person, or if you're a parent or a friend who's like who sees someone is suffering, just be there to listen. Don't try to give solutions. I think that's a very good point.
Yeah. Could I just add on one more thing though?
Yeah.
And that's if you are the person that your friend is going to and you are alone. don't do it alone. Because it's very easy to burn out when you're another person's only source of support. Yeah, so I would encourage you to get another family member involved.
Then, do you have any tips for any parents who are watching or?
I mean, beyond what has already been said, there's very little that I can add. But I think the one thing that comes to mind is if we're seeking to help somebody, really genuinely understanding how they're feeling, genuinely asking, how are you doing? What's going on? Really listening. The energy with which we ask those questions matters a lot. If somebody's going through something, the last thing that they want to do is worry everybody in their lives. So, like it was said, 9 times out of 10, often they won't say anything if, they feel like they're burdening somebody or they're, bothering somebody. So making sure you're genuinely asking that question from a place of love rather than, worry or sadness or anxiety. Find that place of love inside of your heart and ask the question from that place. The person will feel that you're coming from that genuine place of love, and they'll be more likely to open up. Because the last thing somebody who's going through something wants to do is burden a family member or burden a friend. So, that place that you're coming from really matters. So really, at the end of the day, the best tip that I could ever offer is just love. Just open your heart to the people who are important to you and come to them with love and the genuine desire to help.
All right, I guess this will be a wrap. I want to thank Asher, Nick, and Dan again for joining us in this conversation to have an open conversation about mental health. And all these things are so important, what we talked about today, being a friend, being a person who's experienced it, and as a parent. There's so many things that we could sort of put in a little bit more effort in, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.